office. He said, look, I have long believed that a president can fire an FBI director for any reason or for no reason at all. I'm not going to spend time on the decision or the way it was executed. I hope you won't either. He went on to say, it's done, I'll be fine, although I will miss you, and I will certainly miss the mission as well. Bill?
Kevin, how soon does the White House expect to move on this? And do you have any leads on who might draw the most interest at the moment?
The first question is a little bit tougher, because obviously while the interview process is already underway, you never know how quickly they can turn around and come to a consensus. This is an important decision. You want to get someone who not only will have strong Republican support, but also someone that might get a couple of votes from the Democrats, although it seems highly unlikely. I do want to throw one name out to you who just seems to always pop up whenever there's a major opening somewhere in Washington, and that's Trey Gowdy. Now, he hasn't expressed an interest in this, but because he is so no-nonsense, there is a growing consensus, at least among some on the right, that he would make a terrific FBI director, although I'm not so certain that he would want to give up the position he's currently in. I want to share a couple of other names. Adam Lee, special agent in charge in Richmond, Michael Anderson over in Chicago, and Paul Abadi, FBI executive from Cyber. Just a few of the other names that we're hearing, although the vetting process, if you will, Bill, continues even as we speak.
Got it. Thank you, Kevin. Watching all that with you as we go forward. Thank you, Kevin Cork from the White House. Shannon.
All right, while we await that hearing to get started, joining us now, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Judge, oh my goodness. Okay, as you were sitting down, we talked about something that just crossed from Senator Feinstein, of course, the ranking member, top Democrat on Senate Judiciary. She says that both the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, should recuse themselves from any decision regarding special counsel. Now, this comes as just 2 weeks ago during his confirmation hearing, they were insisting that he move forward with appointing special counsel. Not anymore.
Well, the Attorney General already has recused himself.
Right.
But she's now asking the Deputy Attorney General, the number 2 person for whose confirmation she just voted, after she, as you pointed out, asked him to commit to appointing an independent counsel to recuse himself. How far down the pecking order are they going to go? This, I think, is a political request, and it'll go in one ear and out the other. We do have the separation of powers. Even though she's on the Judiciary Committee, she really can't tell the FBI how to do their job.
Well, she is one who will be critical once they try to move forward with an FBI director. We have a number of Democrats on the Hill saying they're going to block anything. Until they get that special prosecutor, they're not going to move forward on a vote on an FBI director.
Well, they can slow down, but they can't block. This appointment is not subject to filibuster.
Right.
So they would really only need 51 votes to confirm the person. But remember, there are 2 searches going on. There's the search for the interim director of the FBI, somebody to replace Andrew McCabe, who does have some ethical and political baggage with which the Attorney General doesn't want to deal. A guy who's worked his way up from agent to number 2, now acting number 1, but they're going to appoint an interim. Why do they need an interim? Because it may be months before a permanent director is in because of the delay by the Democrats. So White House looking for permanent, Justice Department looking for interim.
And as you're speaking there, we see the witnesses walking in. And again, this would have been testimony by the FBI Director James Comey today. Now the acting FBI Director, as you mentioned, McCabe, will fill that seat. Do you think we get anything meaty from this hearing today? Because it's going to be about Russia. Comey's name certainly will come up.
Investigation. There are 2 about the alleged involvement of the Trump campaign with the Russian intelligence services, because those are. I believe that one of them, either Director Pompeo of the CIA or Director Admiral Rogers of the NSA, will warn about the seriousness of North Korea's threats and their capability either for cyber warfare or for actual delivery of military hardware in the neighborhood of our allies and even towards the west coast of the United States. So fairly confident we're going to hear that from them.
Okay, so again, we know we'll get questions about Russia, where these different investigations are going. What do you make about the decision of the Senate Intelligence Committee to now formally subpoena former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn?
All right, so he received, or his lawyers received, 2 subpoenas. One from the chief federal prosecutor, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. D.C., and one from the Senate Intelligence Committee. We haven't seen the document. When documents are, we haven't seen the subpoena. When documents are subpoenaed, you do not have the Fifth Amendment privilege. If a human being is subpoenaed, they can say, I'm not going to testify because it might violate my rights, assert my rights under the Fifth Amendment. You don't have that privilege with documents. They are probably looking for any business or financial relations that General Flynn had with any foreign government at any time in his life while he was a general, and since he left the military, he will be required to surrender those documents.
Yeah, and apparently they asked without a subpoena. They didn't get what they wanted, so now the subpoena. But there's been a lot of talk, too, that he would not come forward and cooperate with these various different entities that are investigating unless he had a chance at immunity. It's been rumored. And apparently there's not a deal in the works just yet.
Well, if there's not a deal in the works, we're not going to see him today. They have probably several weeks to surrender the documents. Investigators will then examine the documents, tell the senators what they found. Then the senators will call in the general. They'll ask him questions, and he probably won't answer. And any good lawyer would tell him not to answer because he hasn't been charged with anything yet. So anything he does say might be used by the prosecutors in any charge against him. No one's saying he committed a crime, but he's vulnerable when he's under oath and they're asking him questions about his own financial documents.
Absolutely. Okay, let's listen in now. This is Richard Burr, the Republican and chairman of Senate Intelligence Committee.
In our elections is a significant threat. The purpose of today's hearing is to review and highlight to the extent possible, the ranges of threats that we face as a nation. The national security threat picture has evolved significantly since 1995. What used to be a collection of mostly physical and state-based national security concerns has been replaced by something altogether different. Today, our traditional focus on countries like North Korea, Russia, and Iran is complicated by new challenges like strategic threats posed by non-state actors in the cyber arena, and the danger of transnational terrorists who can use the internet to inspire violence and fear in the homeland, all without leaving their safe havens in the Middle East. What has not changed, however, is the tireless dedication and patriotism of the women and men who make up the United States intelligence community, the very people represented by our witnesses this morning. One of the many reasons I find so much value in this hearing is that it provides the American public with some insight into the threats facing our country. But it also lets people know what's being done on their behalf to reduce those threats. I encourage all the witnesses today to not only address the threats to our nation, but to talk about what their organizations are doing to help secure this country to the degree they can in an unclassified setting. Director Coates, your written statement for the record represents the collective insight of the entire intelligence community. It is a lengthy and detailed account of what this country is facing. It is also evidence of why the substantial resources and investments this committee authorizes are in fact necessary. From the human tragedy of the refugee crisis in the Middle East to the risk that territorial ambitions will set off a regional conflict in the South China Sea, it's a complicated and challenging world. Director Pompeo, the Korean Peninsula is a point of particular concern to me and to many on this committee. I'd like your insights into what is behind North Korea's unprecedented level of nuclear and missile testing and how close they are to holding the U.S. mainland at risk of a nuclear attack. I'd also value your sense of how Tuesday's elections of a new president in South Korea is going to impact things for us on that peninsula. General Stewart, I'm sure you're aware of the reinvigorated policy discussions on Afghanistan. While we all respect that you can't offer your own recommendations on what that policy should be, I would very much value your assessments of the situation in Afghanistan today, including the state of governance in Kabul, the sustainability and proficiency of the Afghan National Security Forces, and whether Taliban reconciliation is a realistic objective. If the U.S. is ramping up in Afghanistan, we need to know the IC's views on what we're getting into. I also hope you'll share your assessments of the battlefield in Iraq and in Syria with us this morning. Your insights into conditions on the ground, including ongoing operations to dislodge ISIS from Mosul and sustainability of the Mosul Dam, would be of great value to the members of this committee and to the public. Admiral Rogers, I've made a couple of references to cyber already, and that's for good reason. Of the many difficult challenges we're going to discuss this morning, nothing worries me more than the threat of a well-planned, well-executed, wide-scale attack on the computer networks and systems that make America work. From banking and healthcare to military and critical infrastructure, the functionality of our modern society is dependent on computers. When the first line of the DNI's statement reads, and I quote, "Nearly all information, communications networks, and systems will be at risk for years," unquote, that alarms me. Admiral Rogers, I look forward to hearing from you on this line of assessments. Director Cardilla, as head of the NGA, you sit at the nexus of innovation in data collection and analysis. Given the complexity of the intelligence questions the IC is being confronted with and the global nature of our national security threats to this country that this country faces, expectations of NGA are high. We know the IC can't be everywhere at once, but that's still kind of what we look to the NGA to do. I'd appreciate your sense of what NGA analytic strengths are today and what the role of commercial imagery is in NGA's future. Director McCabe, welcome to the table and into the fray. To the extent possible, I hope you'll discuss the Bureau's assessments of the terrorist threat within our borders. Your agents are often our last line of defense here at home, and I will say, continue to do outstanding work. We're fortunate to have 6 people with the experience and the dedication that we have today. I'll close there, but I'd like to highlight for my colleagues, the committee will be holding a classified hearing on worldwide threats this afternoon at 1:30. I will do everything I can to make sure that the questions that you ask in this open session are appropriate to the venue that we're in. I would ask you to think about that long and hard, and if there's a question to move to a staffer to ask them whether this is the appropriate area, and if you, as our witnesses, feel that there's something that you can't sufficiently answer in an open setting, that you will pause long enough to get my attention, and we'll try to make sure that we move to the appropriate setting. With that, I turn to the Vice Chairman for any comments he might make.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership on this committee. And I also want to join in welcoming the witnesses. It's good to see you all, but it is impossible to ignore that one of the leaders of the intelligence community is into any links between the Trump campaign and the Russian government or its representatives, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts to interfere in our election. Session. We and the American people were supposed to hear straight from the individual responsible for the FBI investigation. We anticipated asking Director Comey a series of questions It's important to restate protecting the independence wonder a little bit how seriously I know the White House continues to dismiss this investigation. I point out simply for the record the front page of the New York Times, which shows a picture of clearly an administration that doesn't take this investigation too seriously. It is important to restate the critical importance of protecting the independence and integrity of federal law enforcement. This is central to maintaining the confidence of the American people in principle that all Americans, no matter how powerful, are accountable before the law. The President's actions have the potential to undermine that confidence, and that should be deeply concerning, no matter which political party you belong to. This week's remarkable developments make our committee's investigation into Russia's influence on the 2016 U.S. presidential election even more important. And while it is clear to me now more than ever that an independent We hope to speak to Mr. Comey, and we'll speak to anyone and everyone that has something to offer in this investigation. And Mr. McCabe, well, I didn't necessarily expect to see you here today, and we don't know how long you'll be acting FBI director. But while I will adhere to what the chairman has indicated in terms of the line of questioning, I will want to make sure my first question for you, even in this public setting, will be for you to assure the committee that if you come bipartisan footing with the shared goal of getting the truth. In spite of the events of the last 24 hours, I intend to maintain our committee's focus on the investigation. Indeed, the recent actions only increase the burden of responsibility on all of us to ensure that we live up to this challenge and to uncover the truth wherever that leads. There is obviously consensus agreement among the U.S. intelligence community that Russia massively intervened with active measures in the 2016 presidential elections. Nor do I imagine that any member of this committee was surprised to see the exact same Russian playbook just being run during the French elections that just took place last weekend. And no one should forget, back in mid-2015, Director Coates, I had some of the folks in from the German services recently, that there was a hacking into the German Bundestag. It's fair to say that Germans should anticipate seeing more cyber attacks directed against their elected officials with their upcoming national elections in September. In short, Russia's direct interference in democratic process around the globe is a direct assault that we must work on together, and is clearly one of the top worldwide threats. That being said, gentlemen, I want to start again by thanking you for your service to the nation. I want to particularly note that Director Coates, who is testifying before this committee in the first time since his confirmation. Dan, I know that you and Marcia were ready for retirement, and I thank you both for being willing to serve your country one more time. I also want to recognize the men and women who you represent here today. These thousands of dedicated intelligence professionals toil in the shadows, put their lives on the line, and make sacrifices most of us will never know in order to keep our country safe. I also want to make sure they know that I appreciate their efforts and am proud